Welcome everyone to Blue Collar Startup. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Nelson from Five Towers Media. Derek Foster from Daigle Cleaning Services may be jumping in here. He's got a meeting running late, so he's going to join us if he can. But we're joined today by I think what I would call now a regular guest on the show. What would you say, Scott?
Yeah,
It's
routine.
routine. Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So Scott
consistent.
McKenna from Catamount Consulting. Scott, thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and just to tee that up a little bit for our listeners, if you listened to Derek and I a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing the idea about becoming unfireable and kind of what that means and what it takes to become unfireable. And Scott had listened to the episode, reached out afterwards with some thoughts, and that led into a conversation, well, a couple conversations about EQ, which I believe Derek and I also teased a little bit on our last episode.
Yeah,
Um, and so today we're going to talk about EQ and maybe touch on the unfireable part. I think will be a part of that conversation as well. But and Scott, I guess we should probably start with, because Derek and I was like EQ. I'm like, I know it's emotional. I'm like, it's either emotional quotient or so what is EQ, Scott? Let's start there.
well, EQ is emotional intelligence.
Okay.
So why isn't it EI? I have no idea. That would probably be a Stacy question. She couldn't make it today with us, but it's EQ is around this self-awareness and this understanding of empathy and the ability to motivate people and have good conversations. So in my mind, I'm always thinking about who was the most influential coach or person in my life. And
Mhm.
whether it was my father or my grandfather or a coach, right? Literally in the world of athletics where I spent a lot of time, they had a lot of EQ. They listened more than they talked. They gave advice where it was necessary. They were ninja-like, right? And so it's all the really important skills that you find in people who are really good in the people business, which is how I would translate EQ.
So really it comes down to just how good you are with the people around you, right? And the interactions, the communications, the how you navigate the waters, so to speak, of, let's face it, I mean, in business, and it doesn't matter if it's in the trades or in marketing or whatever, it's pretty much in any kind of business. Most of these businesses are people related. Like you might
Yeah.
be building a house, but you still have to deal with your clients and customers. You still have to deal with your teammates, your employees, and being able to interact with these folks and have that interaction end up, would you say, like a positive interaction, or maybe it just has a positive result? Because I almost feel like in some cases EQ requires conflict. I don't know if that's correct or not, but
I don't know. I would, it's not just how you present with everyone else and how you do in the people business and socializing. It's also how you reflect on yourself, the ability to get out of your comfort zone. Derek talked when you guys chatted last week about there's times where this is not comfortable.
yeah.
And he had a job and did the company on the side. And eventually he had to give up his full-time job. And that's all very uncomfortable. And people with high levels of emotional intelligence understand that perhaps the obstacle is the way, right? And there's a lot of written stuff about that. You can't get shiny without having a little bit of an abrasive rub, right? If we're polishing rocks. So it's a self-awareness, and it's okay when you're feeling those things. It's that's all part of emotional intelligence. Does it have to be difficult? No, but you have to be okay with it being difficult. People with high levels of emotional intelligence seem to do well when there's trauma and the shit's hitting the fan, and we all got to get together and figure out how to really make this happen, right?
Yeah.
Get this done. Dial in. Let's dial in.
Yeah, I know that we talked about on that last episode about the fact that no matter what level business you are, like things are going to be uncomfortable, especially when you're trying to grow or you're trying to become larger than you are now or be better than you are now. That it's just there's going to be stress and it's going to be uncomfortable, and you really have to have the emotional intelligence, right, to be able to deal
Yep.
with that in a constructive manner and not let it blow you up or self-destruct, right?
Yeah. So when we chatted about a couple of conversations that you two have had that I didn't have the luxury of being on, but I got to listen, which was actually maybe better. I was able to listen, keep a perspective, navigate, keep some notes, and really reach back out to some of my thoughts, which what led us to this. But it there was a lot of talk about being unfireable, which I think is a great term. Another great term is coachable, right? I mean, if you're coachable in an organization and do a very good job with whatever you're tasked to do, right? You show up and do more than you're paid to do. Eventually, you'll get paid more to do what you're doing. Is an important component. Sorry, one of the guys walking by, I had to give him a little, so he doesn't think I'm totally crazy in my truck talking to the screen like so intimately that I'm leaning in to see what you look like on the other end of this phone. But it's coachable, it's unfireable, it's entrepreneurial because I can do everything with all these same skills. I don't have to stay working here. I could also do my own thing. Yeah. So I had a super interesting conversation, but as I ramble on, I've always said, whether I've been in the coaching business with kids in athletics in high school and college, or in the business of working with young leaders or leaders that have been around for their entire life, is that this is more important than IQ. And if I was sitting at a board meeting in a school, and we've talked about this before, I feel adamantly we've got to do more training on emotional intelligence inside of our schools than we're doing. More than IQ, maybe not. I mean, I want all our kids to know what they're learning in high school and colleges. For those that need to go to college, we've got to figure out a way to sprinkle in the EQ, because regardless of what profession, even the ones that require high IQ, high college degrees, lawyers, doctors, accountants, they could benefit as well from EQ with their staff. And there's a lot to that to unpack, but there's an awful lot of toxicity inside of some of those high IQ environments, and I would argue it's because they have low EQ built into their curriculum. Just to be completely respectfully fair.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that. And again, it's been a long time since I was in high school, but I don't remember a time in school. And even now I've got 4 kids in the school system, and I don't know of any moments where they're talking about emotional intelligence and, learning about whether it's just simple bonding and rapport, or understanding the fact that when someone's having a bad day and they're being really gruff and prickly, so to speak, right? That there's reasons for that, and understanding that and how it affects them and why they're interacting with you the way they are. I don't think the kids have said anything about that. And I think we all have a story of at some point of when we dealt with, whether it was a contractor or anyone that was like, that gruff, rough kind of, not really a people person, and how it affects the interaction you have, but how it affects the overall experience of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point. Yeah. Good point. I mean, we can all remember the shitty managers we've had, or the shitty coaches we've had, and you can pinpoint exactly why they were shitty, and you can do the exact opposite for the best ones.
Yeah. And it's not that they're not great at what they do.
Yeah.
But you don't, even though they're great, you almost don't want to work with them again, because the experience of working with them sucks so bad. Even if the finished product was amazing, but the whole interaction throughout was just not fun. I mean, no one wants to deal with that, and I feel like that's where EQ comes in. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, and to some extent, if you talk back to the schools, we may not hear from our kids that they talked about EQ or it came up, right? It should be inadvertently in there. Yeah. Please and thank you. Holding doors open. Not texting while you're having a conversation with your teacher or your coach or your coworker or your friends. Socializing at the lunch table, and figuring out ways to encourage that, and the kids will inadvertently encourage emotional intelligence, right? Growth mindset and getting out of your comfort zones. All conversations that we had in schools on not yet. You're not yet good at English, but give me till November and we're going to work on it. That's what I would do with a wrestler. You're not yet winning matches. I will make you a Class D champion, right? I mean, I can't guarantee that, but I would be a statement I would make. But these are the things we're going to put in. These are the ingredients, and it's a not yet. You are losing miserably right now, but eventually we will get better because we're going to implement these things.
Yeah. And, while you're talking about this too, Stacy had sent over a couple of notes, and, one of the things that she said in there with talking about why EQ is more valuable than IQ, one of the things she said is she's like, a welder with great skills and a bad attitude costs more than he's worth, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's something we should unpack and kind of help people understand because it's right in line with what we're talking about right now. Do you want to kind of expand on that statement a little bit?
Yeah, first of all, we got to give Stacy all the credit in the world because
Yeah.
Catamount lives and breathes on the concept that people are flawed. We're having a conversation about it. Mindset's everything. It's the key component to everything that we do, and everyone needs a coach. So Stacy is one of my most valuable and trusted coaches. So when she put some of these things together, it twofold. Let's make sure that Michael and Scott don't get too far on a tangent, right? This was her way of saying, keep it organized, boys. So, and two, it's how I function, right? It's the content and the coaching that goes on by someone like Stacy in my world that just keeps me, keeps me on track, keeps me from falling off the rails. And I've known you long enough to know that you also need a little bit of this. So it's, but yeah. So back to the conversation of toxicity. It's we would much rather have, all of us would much rather have a coachable, less skilled laborer and work with them versus a highly skilled laborer with a really bad attitude and toxicity because it drags the entire team down. I'll put it a different way. And if we look at it in the world of athletics, and we've all seen it, there's a top end college level basketball player that's sitting on the couch and yelling at the TV screen, like, I used to kick the crap out of that guy, dunked over him, passed over him, but he's sitting on the couch and the other guy's in the NBA or the NFL because he's a jerk.
Yeah.
He's right. He's uncoachable. And so many times we used to have the comment, and I didn't make it up, but talent doesn't always win, right?
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of really, really talented people who are sitting on the couch
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they just are unwilling to talk about, let's not even talk about emotional intelligence or EQ. It's just being a good damn person. But
Yeah.
it requires conversations and studying it and adjusting it. And it's a nonstop thing that we're working on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too, because I remember in high school, in both football and basketball, I remember in each sport a couple of kids that were talent wise, they're way better than I was, and
Yes.
but they never got playing time, and at the time I never really understood it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until like later on in life where I started to be like, oh, because they had terrible attitudes. They were not team players. They were just anytime they would get playing time, you could see the morale of the people that were on the floor coming down. I mean, it's amazing how much that has an impact on things and how that applies to anything in life, really.
Yeah, there's likely the coaches, you had some ability on the field to pull other players in with you, right? Even if you weren't the best in the field at the time,
Yeah.
the ones that were on the fringe were getting better because they were in your presence.
Yeah.
And it's contagious, whether it's for the good or the bad. That's still emotional intelligence. I was just a couple months ago on the phone with one of the guys that does some of my banking, and I'll leave names out, but a conversation about sports, which I thought again was fascinating. He had a buddy of his that he played baseball with, and his buddy was a coach somewhere down closer to New York City. I don't know exactly where, and it does not matter. High-end recruit who was the favorite to go to any Division I baseball team he wanted to in the country. Had 3 scouts there for this particular game. Pitches a perfect game. Scouts come down. Everyone, coach and kid want to talk about, so which one of you want me, right? Essentially was a conversation. All 3 coaches went up to the coach and said, thanks, but no thanks. We're not interested in your pitcher. We watched how he treated all the other people on the field, and you included. He's not welcome on any one of our programs. And you think about that, that's a true story. Like, I didn't make it up. And
Yeah.
I'm like, exactly. Like, exactly. We're getting on sidetrack, which is, this is why State's supposed to be here. But
That's apropos.
this is what we're supposed to be doing. And you haven't met Jason, Stacy's husband yet, but if he's sitting here, he would say, Scott, you're not there to coach that kid. You're there to coach the entire program so that nobody acts like that. That's not acceptable, whether you're the best guy on the team or the worst guy on the team. And there's the coaches talking about it. You don't fit our profile. You will not fit in our team, and you will be toxic. We don't care how skilled you are. We will take someone else. Thank you. Crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy.
I mean, because you think as a coach, you're like, well, I don't care how bad he is. Let's just put him in a box, pull him out to pitch, and we'll put him back in that cage. No one has to even be near him. He's just a saber-tooth tiger we pull out when we need him. But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And I
You
know,
know?
when you look at it too, just for small businesses, I know I have done it in the past, and I know that I've seen other small businesses do it where they hire people just because of like what's available or who's available, and they don't take emotional intelligence into consideration and how that person's going to interact with your clients, the other team members, and then you see it's just an awful experience for everyone involved, right? Like,
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And when you guys talked the last time, you were talking about bringing the right people on the team.
mhm.
I call that bringing the right person on the bus. Like, let's get the wrong people off the bus, the right people on the bus. I picture us driving around to pick up all of our crew to work for us, and let's recruit them. And there's a way to do it, right? If a guy comes in for an interview with you and his mother comes with him, and he's talking to her completely disrespectfully and rude to her, like, that's a sign. Like, this isn't going to work. You're not going to work on our team if that's the way that you talk to your own mother. And
Yep.
there's higher end ways of being able to figure out if a person is coachable. It's already been invented. One of our favorite ones, which we use once in a while, is with Angela Duckworth. And
Okay.
she wrote a book around grit, which you and I have chatted about. I think you've even read it, all of it or parts of it. And grit is defined as passion and perseverance is her terminology. And she has I think she calls it a grit scale. So you could actually take like a questionnaire and see how gritty you are. And I would argue, as an employer, I would figure out a way to find gritty people with passion and perseverance. I can teach them everything else, but let's
Yeah.
get the right people on the bus by making sure we get the gritty people, the people that are going to show up and put in their all. And there should be good ways of measuring that when you're looking to bring people in.
Speaking of bringing people in, and it kind of sounds like it gets into company culture a little bit, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a lot. I'm just curious, as you're working with organizations, how does that play? How does emotional intelligence and culture and company values and mission, how does that kind of all come together?
I'm biased on this conversation. Like, I'm literally, you heard my three truths, Catamount's three truths, and mindset's everything, right? I, it's everything. It's the mindset, the coachability, the all these things are everything. It'll all function if you have those in place. It can still function if you don't, right? There are some pretty toxic supervisors and toxic leaders in the environments, and it still functions. The work gets done, but it's not. If we listen to Amy Edmondson's work, it's not psychologically safe. And Amy Edmondson would measure psychological safety as you have high performance skills, but you have high psychological safety. There's synergy. You're well open for conversation. You're willing to ask questions when you got them, and there weren't. Your opinion counts. And once you establish the highest of those two models, then you can move into the learning zone. And she's got all kinds of work on this. And
Mhm.
we spend a lot of time researching her stuff. And a high psychologically safe operation is more productive than a low psychologically safe environment. You're running around on stress and chaos, and you can't be productive multitasking with all that stuff going on in your head. It's not physically possible.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to imagine that in turn affects the quality of the work you're doing. Like, I know that
Right.
when I'm stressed out and I've got, my AR's out of control and my cash is low and I got all these bills and payroll, like, it's really hard to do a great job on anything. And I have to assume that regardless of what the situation that's causing that stress and anxiety, it's got to have an impact, right?
Absolutely does. Yeah, that was all of our work, as well as all the other folks that studied our brain at work and our brain at play and what stress and trauma do. Stacy told me recently, which I'm sure is accurate because she does all kinds of research, is that our brain is only designed to have a very small amount of stress in a given day. Is it 30 minutes? Is it 40? Whatever the number is. But you got to think, in our caveman and woman days, it was designed to have just enough stress so that we could outrun the saber-tooth tiger. If you didn't, you died. If you
Right.
did, the run was over. You didn't run all day. So if you have a supervisor with low emotional intelligence, or even an employee with low emotional intelligence, and is that saber-tooth tiger, at your workforce, they're on your ass every day, all the time. Your mind and body is not designed to deal with that. You can't outrun it, right? In whether it's a perceived stress or trauma or chaos, or it's actual stress or chaos or trauma, chaos, stress, however order that goes, your brain can't distinguish between the two, and it's only designed to have short versions of it. I think that's also fascinating if you think about it.
It is fascinating. And it makes me think about, I have a client that literally just lost like one of their key employees. And the reason was because another employee, their emotional intelligence, based on our conversation, was obviously low and wasn't picking up on the fact that they were constantly giving stress to this person day in and day out. And the person finally was just like, I got to do something else. I need a change, you know?
Yeah.
And so they lost this very valuable employee that was great at what they
Yep.
did.
Yep.
You know, it's that
Yep.
whole
That's
bad apple spoiling the bunch, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's important, even if we set aside the whole conversation that you guys have been having and I've been engaged with on the backside on Unfireable or Coachable, as a company, if we start thinking about, okay, I got it, but why invest? That's why you invest. You've got to double down on making sure that your leadership team has a high level of EQ, because it engages the rest of the staff and keeps them on your company's payroll versus someone else's. There's
Mm-hmm.
people that are working for some of these organizations that are so completely unengaged, they're shopping for their next job while they're working for you.
So yeah, and that's the worst. That's the worst thing that happens when good employees are shopping for their next job while they're working for you. Uh,
Right.
uh, and just so that Stacy's keeping us on track here. So she had put some notes in, you know, talking about what EQ looks like on the job. I'm just gonna read them real quick, and
Okay.
then have you unpack them if that's all right. But so
Yeah.
she wrote 4 things about what it looks like up on the job, right? And this is, I want to make sure we touch on this to help listeners, like, give them some criteria. So if you have an employee and they're exhibiting these things, this probably means they have good EQ. But if they're not exhibiting them, they probably have a low EQ. So
Okay.
the 4 things are: one is showing up with good attitude even when things are going wrong. The second is taking feedback without getting defensive. I think that's huge. A third is reading a coworker's stress before snapping back. And then the fourth is going to be, you know, leading without a title by keeping your crew focused and calm. Can you kind of just, you know, unpack that a little bit? You don't have to address each one, but maybe just kind of as an overall idea of what EQ looks like on the job.
Yeah, sure. Her and I have spent long enough together to realize that that's just a couple of many
Yeah.
that are inside of organizations that have that both at a high level of psychological safety, but they aren't lackadaisical either, right? They're
Mhm.
still performing at high levels. They're working like a well-oiled machine, and it's a comfortable spot to ask questions and have discussions, have good debriefs. It's so what does EQ look like on the job site really is the conversation. And it if we were to pull up some sort of a Netflix series on some major military thing that we've done, and you digest it all as to who did what and when and what they anticipated, and they expected these 3 things to possibly go wrong, but they had a game plan to deal with all those things. They had the tools, they had the people, they had the backup to have a successful mission, which everyone goes in, successfully
Mhm.
gets the mission done, and everyone comes home at the end of the day, right? That's managing risk, managing stress. That would be an extremely high level of detail, but it would also have a high level of emotional intelligence built into the team. Because if any one of those team members said, this is bullshit, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or she doesn't know what she's talking about, this is going to happen, they're not on the same page, it's going to be chaotic. And when we look at job sites that have low levels of good supervisors, right, low levels of EQ in their supervisors, it's chaotic, and they're constantly putting out fires. So
Interesting. So you're saying with high emotional intelligence, you see fewer fires to put out. Help me understand why. Like, what's the correlation?
well, people even in just conversations like ownership, extreme levels of ownership, and when they see situations, they solve them, they own them, and they do them. They're not constantly coming to your desk saying, "Look, we're missing a cone here. What do I do? I don't have a rigging chain. What do I do? The taillight's out of my backhoe. What do I do?" Like, they're just fixing it. They're just dealing with it, right? So it relieves some of the leadership team to be able to focus on other things that they need to be doing, and not in the trenches doing what all those other people should already know how to do, and have enough sense of security in their relationship with the operation and you as their supervisor or leader to just do it. And if you screw it up, you're not going to get a major ass chew, and you may have a conversation about how can we do this better moving forward, but you're not scared to death of getting the ass chewing either.
Interesting. And I know, and you mentioned, well, you didn't mention it, but you said the words extreme and ownership pretty close together, which made me think of Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, which is an amazing, amazing book.
Absolutely. One we spent a lot of time with, side by side with the Oz Principle.
Yeah.
Which is a book that puts out a great chart that we love, that's just about being above the line. So those two together make just a really fun conversation when you're trying to have those aha moments with people on taking ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that, like, taking ownership, or have that, like, is that a part of EQ, or do you have to have EQ to have the ability to take that kind of ownership? Like, how are those two things connected?
I would say yes, 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 and yes. Jocko talks about in his book that he learned it through the military, right? So, and I'm not going to speak for him. It'd be fun sometime to get him on and speak with us, but
Yeah,
he's a badass, right? So he's a badass going through badass stuff, goes through Navy SEAL training, still super badass. Now he's got to run a crew, and now he's got to take some direction and give some direction. And he claims that in his book that one of the things he learned is to take extreme ownership. If something goes wrong on his watch, who else is he supposed to point the finger at?
Yeah.
Right. And so if I have losing wrestling teams when I was coaching, is it useful to blame the parents and the officials and the AD and the principal and the superintendent and Stacy?
Right.
Like, it's not. It's okay, we lost. I'm taking ownership, and then I'm going to figure out, how do we fix this? That was his message, which I live and breathe by whenever I possibly can. And anytime that there's people around us that are willing to listen, should also.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, even now, and I think before I read that book, but certainly after reading it, when I hear people are discussing how they dealt with issues or went wrong, and when I hear people not taking ownership and starting to point the finger, like, who wants to listen to that, right?
Yeah.
It,
No. Yeah. I mean, I don't want you to. It sounds like you're going to go on an amazing tangent, and I didn't want to cut you off because I think there's something there I plan on stealing the next time I talk to someone.
yeah,
Yeah, but who wants to listen to that? Right. I mean, all right, what's the solution? Right. It's like, tell me the solution.
yeah, don't tell me why it's all Timmy's fault and all the things Timmy did wrong. Like, I don't care, like,
Yeah.
and I tell people all the time, like, with my team, when I start trying to have a constructive conversation with them, I'm like, hey, listen, I am not here to assign blame. I don't care whose fault it is. That my objective is not to figure out who I can blame for the situation. My objective is to fix it and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's just, and the idea of extreme ownership, I think prevents you from even going down that wrong path of spending. Why would you spend time trying to figure out whose fault it is? Like, what would that even mean? Or what would that even
Yeah. Agreed. And getting your staff to do the same, or getting the teammates to do the same. And it just, you actually get to a point where you don't have difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're so good at it as a team. And if I came to you and said, Michael, you really frigged that up today.
Yeah.
It was your worst performance was today. You and I are on the same page, and you're not mad about it. You're like, I didn't feel like I was performing well, and let's figure this out. What are we gonna do tomorrow that's gonna make this better? And now we're in the back and forth arm wrestling match, and we're performing tomorrow. It's another day. It's not our level of ownership between the two of us, our level of psychological safety between the two of us, right? This is synergy, sympathy, empathy, communication. We want to be here at the table. It takes all that other stuff off your plate, and we're highly productive because of it. It's a
Yeah.
2-minute conversation when we're going to perform at a really high level over the next 48 hours because of it.
Yeah. And I think that, the trust that you have to build in order to have that conversation too with someone else. Like I talk a lot about this with my team. I'm like, listen, if you guys come to me with something I'm doing wrong, poorly, incorrect, whatever it is, like I
Mm,
trust you enough to know that you're coming just because you're not trying to make me feel bad. You're trying to make me, you want us to do better as a team. And which means you have to
yeah.
have that conversation. So I'm not going to get pissed. I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to lash out at you and tell you you're wrong, right? I'm gonna listen to it and be like, well, if this person is saying this to me, they must be doing it because they want us to be better, not because
Yeah.
they're trying to, hurt my feelings or whatever.
And there's a component with the ownership piece. I mean, it's a small component of EQ. I don't even know if it falls completely in EQ on
Mm-hmm.
its own. It's just it's good business. It's good people. It's good athletes, right? It's top performance. Maslow said we all have an innate interest in being the best version of ourselves. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
blaming everyone around you, you can't possibly think you're being the best version of yourself, right? I mean, that's got to be fair to at least agree on and where we can work. But it it also is helps when everybody is operating like this. It helps alleviate some of the things that are on your shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a great way to look at even delegation. If you're answering and putting out fires for everyone else in your team, you're taking on everyone else's bricks. So I
Yeah.
look at this like maybe there's a way to strategically become a lazy manager, and no one wants to be called a lazy manager, but a lazy manager in my mind is like one that doesn't have to be there, knows the team's doing what they're supposed to be doing, can function pretty much on their own, wants to touch base once in a while, get some coaching. But that that's a prepared manager, a manager that's prepared their staff to go on all of these missions that they've got to go on a daily basis and be highly successful. Right? They're not coming to you for a bunch of questions.
Yeah. It
I think
sounds
that's
like,
the real magic.
yeah, I mean, you say lazy manager, and I immediately think efficient manager, which means they're
Yeah,
doing,
right.
like
Yeah,
it's not that they don't want to do anything, it's that they're so efficient and successful in how they're doing it that it requires less energy in order
that's
to do
right.
it. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it was termed lazy manager. I'll think about it inside of some delegation books, become James Bondish, right? In the work that you're doing and become lazy in the way that you deal with things like the empowerment triangle and the drama triangle and working with the big stick versus hands off. And there's a bunch of components to it, but it can be called whatever you want. I would call it smart. I would call it the EQ manager or coach, the well equipped, the one who's studying and looking at adding tools to their tool belt so that he or she can be better with in the people business. It's the fact of the matter is it frees you up, and doesn't mean that you're going to go to the beach, but it frees you up to look at other things,
Mm-hmm.
right? To look at the next job and look at the next situation, and maybe frees you up to be able to do some mentoring with that 22-year-old that's on your project. I mean, that's what you should be doing,
Yeah.
which is really really cool when we're working with groups that get to that point. Like, man, I I was perceived busy, but I was just doing everything all wrong and creating more
Mm-hmm.
work for myself than I should have been. So that's always fun when you get to there.
So, I always want to, or always like to, if we can, give people actionable steps, right? And so, one of the things that we should probably talk about, right, is how our listeners, whether they're business owners or managers, project managers, whatever it is, of how they can train their people or train themselves, or improve EQ. And I know Stacy, sent us a couple of things, but I figure maybe I'll have you start, and then if we go off track as we are prone to do, or miss anything, I'll pull it back to the outline. But when it comes to training and improving EQ inside organizations or individuals, how do you do that?
Well, lots of companies are doing this already. It's the formula is just constantly work at it. It's the concept of going to the gym. If you stay consistent, even if it's not to the highest level you'd like, you stay consistent. You work on getting a little bit better all the time, which is stuff that Derek talks about. When he meets with his staff, he's incorporating things that are going to help them both personally and professionally. be a better version of themselves. That's inadvertently teaching EQ, right? Those are, you can insert it all. We talked about it with the teachers and the students and the coaches and the students. You don't have to have an act of God to implement EQ skills into our high school kids. You don't have to do it in college on the work site either.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to have a conversation, well, where do I start? There is so much stuff on leadership out there now,
Mm-hmm.
from the early days of how to influence people, and
Oh yeah, how to
Maxwell,
influence.
right? And we got, I mean, that's old. That's like 60s, 70s, and it's all still stuff we're looking at. Maslow's pyramid of being the best version of yourself and self-actualization, rather. He built that in 1943. It's arguable which time exactly, but the 40s. And he was researching people who were performing at a high level as a psychiatrist instead of researching people who were struggling as a psychiatrist. And so there's lots of information there, and you can pull and plug it. That's what Stacy and I do when we're doing our leadership training with the organizations that bring us on board. It's not stuff that we've invented or a box program that we purchased. We're using thought leaders that we consider our coaches that have all kinds of stuff already in play, like Jocko or like Angela Duckworth, and put it to work.
What about, so some of the things that Stacy had mentioned on here: self-awareness, empathy, composure. Like, how do you teach self-awareness, or better yet, how do I learn self-awareness? Like, what does that even mean?
Right. Well, there is some thought leaders that study this, and if you can think of people like Vanessa Van Edwards would be one. She is I'd like to call her an expert in her field of reading facial expressions. So she would work with military and law enforcement on interrogation. But if you think about that in the business stance, right, like, as well as I do, if I'm smiling, I'm much more approachable than if I'm frowning, or the way that I peer, I might be less approachable. So being self-aware of how you look to your team or people that may want to approach you is a component. That's self-awareness. Self-awareness of, am I snappy? Like, when you come to me and tell me as the owner that I've got flaws, am I like, well, good thing I'm the boss and you're not, Michael? Like, how I have to have self-awareness. One that I like to pick on with Stacy is that her facial expressions are like sometimes horrible. And we laugh about it. It's like, I was like, fix your face. Like, something's being said in a social setting, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm glad they can't see your face, because it was bad. Like, you were wearing it right on your face. And she laughs about it. We have fun about it, but you got to be self-aware.
Say that, though. I actually had a client say to me, where our client, I wasn't in the meeting, and one of my team members was in the meeting, and one of the clients wanted to move a piece of our scope of work off of our plates and take it on internally, because they had hired someone to do that. But they came to me afterwards and like, hey, so, like, is this okay? Because so-and-so like made like a face, like she disapproved of our decision when we mentioned this. And it was totally okay. Like, I knew that it was coming, like it wasn't a big deal, but my team member was obviously not self-aware enough to know that she was making a face that showed disapproval to the client, and the client was kind of taken aback by it, right?
Stacy, when we do these things back and forth where you analyze how self-aware I am or how well I am at reading facial expressions, and there's different things you can do that are kind of dated, where they'll, it's not Vanessa Van Edwards, it's someone else, Stacy will be able to share with us, but there's like a series of black and white eyeballs, like only part of their face, and you got to determine, are they flirting with you? Are they mad at you? Are you happy? Right? Like, I'm horrible at it. Like, I have no idea what these faces are doing, and we chuckle about it, but there's, the point is that you got to be aware of it, and we got to be able to have conversations about it, because it's the right thing. And all of us, if you've spoken in front of groups, I speak tens of thousands of people in a given year. And when you're looking at the crowd of people, there is definitely some faces like, that dude or that girl hates me. But inevitably, every time you speak, especially if it's a bigger group, 200, 300, like you try to stay away from them, because you're like, you can just feel them burning on you. Almost all the time, one of those people will come up and say, this is the best talk we ever had. No one's ever come in here and talk about ownership with us, or chaos and dealing with stress, or that the opposite of play is actually stress and anxiety. So we got to make sure we input play into our life, whatever the conversation is. And so I was very good at reading the face, but they were very unaware of how miserable they look. Because if this was a situation where I was going to ask him or her to go dance with me, I definitely wouldn't have danced with them. I definitely wouldn't have approached them. Right. So there's a ton to unpack inside of that. I think it's fascinating. I don't fall asleep dreaming about it, but you got to be aware of it. And maybe more importantly, what's going on up in here if you think someone else hates you or loves you, right? I mean, and how does that affect your sleep and all the other things that matter, and your stress at work and your productivity? It matters. It just does.
Another thing Stacey had put on the list was empathy, right? And empathy, I can remember back, I think maybe 4th or 5th grade when I started learning the difference between sympathy and empathy, and I guess my question is, how do you train empathy? Like what does that look like? Or how do you learn empathy if you're not an empathetic person?
Right. Well, I find that the younger generation is a little bit better than our generation. Mm-hmm. And likely a lot of this is trained in that subdevelopmental years, that 0 to 8 years old. And you and I think we spoke about this last time, Stacey, you and Derek and I were talking. You and I and Derek and Stacey grew up in the hold the flashlight generation. Our dad said, hold the flashlight. And then you flash it in his eye. He's like, I can't see anything here. It's darker than a well driller's ass. Put the flashlight on the belt. Like he's yelling at you like it's trauma. Like your only job is to hold the flashlight. We're in the flashlight generation. That was really not that empathetic, right? He didn't show us how to hold the flashlight. Why did the guy just wear a headlamp? Like, why did he need me to hold the flashlight? It's like, so and I would argue that, a lot of times when we were growing up, when dad came home, we were running for the beaches. Mm. And now when your kids come home, they're running over to daddy, and they want to give you a big hug. So there's a lot of subdevelopment mental time and training through athletics and teaching. And, you no longer have that. So it's adjusting and changing, and it's not necessarily unmanly or tough to be able to show some vulnerability. And, so I think it's changing, but how do you teach it? You talk about it. You talk about that empathy and vulnerability and opening up to your team. Not only does it really engage them and say, oh yeah, even he makes mistakes, or even she makes mistakes. I thought she was perfect. And it opens up that psychological safety that we're talking about, that it's okay that you're not going to have flawless people. And it's okay if I make mistakes versus always being highly successful.
Yeah.
I know. Brene. Have you ever seen anything on Brene Brown?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, she's the empathy king, really, as far as I'm concerned, right? Yeah. And studying vulnerability and empathy and folks, and what does it mean, and both men and women. And when she talks about it, she thought that generally this self-awareness or this lack of feeling measurable was a woman thing 20 years ago when she started studying, but she realized that it's actually more of a men thing than a woman thing. Women are much better at this than men. And I think that's kind of interesting. It's something you can talk about.
It's what is the name of her book?
Oh,
I wish I was Rogan and I had Jamie.
Yeah,
at the ready here.
She has a number of books and a number of podcasts, and she's spoken on.
It's like radical vulnerability or something like that.
Jesus,
I know.
We'll have to circle back on it.
I'm trying to do a quick search here.
Okay.
She's got a bunch of books now.
So one of the things that she was talking about is this extreme level of vulnerability and being willing to open yourself up. She speaks in either one of her books or podcasts or both that I thought was interesting. She was trying to talk to the people who do the sign language for her presentation. Okay. And she wanted to be very clear. How do you plan on sharing with the hearing impaired what vulnerability is. And apparently the sign language for vulnerability is like weak in the knees.
Oh
So
yeah.
every time she said, so this was, and she said, oh, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about bra and shirt off vulnerability. That's the level of vulnerability we're talking about, is that you don't just get weak in the knees. You're so uncomfortable that you're like, ooh, man, I'm
Yeah.
close to tears type, right? That is what she really emphasizes. That is extreme levels of vulnerability. You're just not uncomfortable having a conversation with somebody, right? We're talking about, you really got to break this down much deeper than that. So
Yeah.
that's how passionate she was about it. She said it has to be emphasized.
Hmm.
So, but it
You know, it's funny, as you're talking to, I was thinking about empathy and part of empathy is understanding, especially in the workplace, right? Is that understanding if someone has a poor reaction to something, there's a good chance it doesn't have anything to do with the current situation and it's about something else. And it makes me think about earlier in my sales career when I used to do a ton of cold calling. And
mm,
I, I mean, I used to get so emotionally attached to those phone calls in the beginning because I just didn't understand why people would be such assholes on the phone.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
I went to a training, and one of the guys said something that stuck with me ever since then. He's like, listen, he's like, you're going to make 100 phone calls. 50 of those people aren't even in the building. Out of the 50 people, only 25 of them are sitting at their desk. Of the 25 sitting at their desk, 15 of them are going to pick up the phone. And out of the 15 of those people that pick up the phone, how many of them had a bad morning? And then here's the sales guy calling them up. And that's why they're hanging up on you. They're yelling at you. They're doing whatever those things. And it
yeah,
was and essentially what he was saying was, if you have a little empathy for the people that you're cold calling right now, you're going to understand that their reaction to your phone call has nothing to do with you. And it has
yeah,
everything to do with what happened in the 4 hours previous to you calling them unexpectedly to try to sell them shit. You know?
yep.
Uh,
There you go. That's a manager with a level of emotional intelligence to help coach you through that process, because that's painful.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Cold call.
it's that's, again, that's where the magic happens, is when you're digesting it and you're just talking about it, right?
Yeah.
It's Stacy's husband Jason coined this conversation around, are you a warrior or are you a guardian, right? So when we talk to the police force, they're dealing with the ups and downs all the time,
Yeah.
and emotional intelligence for them is are you a guardian or do you need to be a warrior? And a lot of times you need to be a guardian, right? You're helping people across the street, you're de-escalating a difficult conversation between a husband and a wife, you're talking someone off the ledge that's wielding a sword in a downtown apartment of Troy. So that's guardian level. And warrior level would be tackling them or banging someone's head off of table and saying, stop arguing. Like, that's not going to work. Right.
Yeah.
So it would function. I mean, it could, but the outcome, right? When you look at how are you going to deal with this event, what is your response? That's the E+R=O that we love talking about. It drastically changes the outcome when you have high levels of emotional intelligence to respond versus react to the situation that you're going to deal with. Are you a warrior or are you a guardian in that scenario for that profession? And it's no disrespect to police officers, but supervisors in the construction field have similar moments,
I'm sure they
right?
want to
It's not.
bang some people's heads off of things all the
That's right.
time.
That's right. And they have things they got to deal with, and they have a choice on how they respond. They can bang the guy's head off the ground and say, you're an idiot, you've always been an idiot, and you're always going to continue to be an idiot. Or they can say, what's happening right now? What's going on with you? How can I help? Let's be solution based. So
this
that's a.
This kind of sounds similar to what something else Stacy put in the outline about composure being a part of teaching it,
Oh
right?
yeah. Composure is tough. I mean, let's all face it, when you're dealing with people who are just not performing at a high enough level yet, you're on the varsity team and the modified kid comes in, you got a lot of stuff on your plate. You got to prepare for the tournament, you're getting yourself in shape, right? And or football based, they're all the same, right? I mean, I use a wrestling analogy because I don't really know anything else, but your composure is tough. And we like to relate composure and how you work on your composure similar to a workout. So if you run up the hill behind your house and you stop, you're going to be breathing like a son of a gun, right? At least I would be. Maybe you're in better shape than me. Right? You're just like gassing. But how long does it take you to get regulated? How long does it take to get your heart rate back? That's the amount of times you run the mountain changes that ability to get back to your heart rate and be able to
Oh, that's
breathe.
interesting.
Composure for difficult conversations or other situations are the same. When you work on them and you practice them and you think about them and you diagnose, okay, this could happen. And I know that Michael's arguing with his girlfriend and he's likely going to come in a little bit disconnected. And I'm going to prepare myself on how do we deal with that. Or maybe I visit with him earlier to try to keep him from falling off the rail with that girlfriend. Maybe the girlfriend's not good for him, right? So it's an awareness, and now I'm in control. And I have the ability to deal with my composure because I've run up and down the hill enough times that I can get back on track.
That's interesting.
That's,
So you got to get your reps in, so to speak, right?
get your reps in and work on your breath work and work on your diet and your nutrition. And it doesn't mean that you need to be in great shape. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about get some movement in and make sure you get your stretch and flex in and just be ready to rock and roll. Right now you're dialed in to be able to deal with whatever the day brings you.
So she included an acronym, FORM, but she didn't say what it means. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, of course. I told you she's my best coach. So everything she tells you, she's already coached me. So don't. No, it's something. Yeah, we use it all the time. It's an acronym. It's FORM. So it stands for family, organization, recreation, and message. That's what FORM is. So when you're working with high levels of emotional intelligence and you're performing at a high level as a person, you understand that it's really important to understand the people's family and things that we're dealing with on their own, the people that work for you, if we're dealing with, specifically work. You understand what their occupation is, right? So you know what it is that they work for you, but if you don't know them, you should know what their occupation is. You know what they like to do recreationally. That's what they do for fun. And you should be talking about all three of those things before you deliver your message. So what we have a bad habit of doing in industry is sharing all the negative bullshit, right? We immediately jump into, you got hurt, you screwed that up, we got a citation, the trench is wrong, and that's all negative, right? Versus giving some connection cues before delivering the blow. Okay. And that's only one scenario. One we really like to look at FORM is if you picture the time that you're meeting someone for the first time and you really want to make a connection with them. Maybe it's a sales call. Maybe it's not that cold call, but now it's someone that you personally want to do business with inside of your world, or something that Derek wants to do in his world. He would be very smart to make sure he was talking about my family and asking me how I did deer hunting and camping last weekend, and asking me how my job's doing, how's Catamount doing, anything new in the leadership space, before delivering the message of, I really would like you to hire me to do the work that you're doing. I would really like you to go out to dinner with me. I would really like you to stop smoking cigarettes as many times as you do, because you're 5 minutes late after every break. Doesn't matter what the message is. I'm much more receptive to be in and engaged because of all of the stuff that you're firing and wiring in my brain, talking about my family and my occupation, my recreation, before delivering the message. But think of how many times people don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's FORM in a nutshell. We think it's a really great little golden nugget that can be used in multiple capacities. It especially the hospitality world. Like there's a lot of people that are upset or annoyed, or the pool's not open, and if you can connect with them and make some relations, they seem to be less worried about the pool once you do so.
Yeah. Definitely. From an emotional intelligence EQ standpoint, it sounds like an easy way to start to build that rapport with someone, understand them a little bit, but also just to show that you have emotional intelligence, right? It's almost like
it's
in the corrective world, right? It's almost like the compliment sandwich, right? Like you lead in with something positive, and then you give them the business, and then you close it with something positive, so that it's not.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. And it's a 3-to-1 likely.
Yeah.
It's 3 positives to 1 withdrawal, just
Yep.
like your bank account. And it's when, and you can make more withdrawals when you've got good synergy and high emotional intelligence side of your organization. It can be quicker, right? Composure is all over the place. So it's bingity, bingity, bing. Like, you don't have to be 3 weeks of fun stuff before I tell you, you're really not doing a great job for us, Michael. Right. It speeds up the process when you're doing it all properly and putting it all in place.
So Scott, I know we're getting short on time here. If you were going to tell our audience one thing about emotional intelligence, what would it be?
Oh, dive in. Right. I have never been around anyone with high levels of all of this we're talking about. Let's throw out emotional intelligence. We're in the people business and we've got to focus on people. And when you're in the people business, you got to be good at working with each other and be coachable as well as be good at coaching. Just dive in on it. And it's a long journey, right? Keep putting the puzzle together and fitting the right pieces in the spots. I know that you'll share out things on your website as time goes on, I'm sure, on different resources and some of these podcasts that are related to us. People can start studying it up. We've mentioned at least a half dozen just in this conversation of thought leaders. You could spend the next year just looking at Jocko's stuff with extreme ownership and grit with Angela Duckworth and Brene Brown. We talked a little bit about play with Stuart Brown, all around play. There's stuff that you can dive into and you'll drastically be better over the course of the next 6 months to a year if you get on board with it.
Yeah, and I also you mentioned The Obstacle is the Way, which is one of my favorite books by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah.
It's probably the book I've given the most to people over the years. It's a great book, any way you look at it, and the philosophies behind it.
You got to reach out to Stacy and get the Bo Weeble story.
Bo Weeble.
Bowl, like Bowl, Weeble, Wiebel, because you're a farmer as well. I don't know if it's more hobby than not, but it doesn't matter. You'll love the story about it being the obstacle of the way. There's a town, not even gonna say I know where it is. You look it up, but she's got the story. Who all their crops were getting eaten up by a pest, a beetle.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying, screw it, we can never grow crops here, they pivoted and they became cotton farmers. And cotton was not something this beetle that was an invasive species liked. So they became extremely profitable doing cotton, but the obstacle is the way. And they celebrate. It's like downtown Saratoga. They got beetles all over the place and statues with beetles on it. They do parades and it's all around this beetle. They're celebrating that we pivoted. The obstacle's away, man. And we chose to not give up and let our town and our revenue stream die. We pivoted. It's so I love the concept of the obstacles away. If it feels a little jagged, you may want to lean in a little bit. And Derek talked about what he called the hockey stick analogy, I think is what he said. I was working out in the gym and I was in the middle of doing some lats and I lost some of what he said, but his point was that iron sharpens iron. That was the mentality. And Abe Lincoln was famous for saying, if you gave me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared for all these moments. And that's going to the gym from the neck up. That is emotional intelligence in a nutshell. And all of the best performing people have high levels of emotional intelligence, hands down, period.
Love it. Scott,
I love it.
If people want to learn more about Catamount Consulting and how you work with companies on learning and teaching and coaching emotional intelligence, where do they find you?
Reach out. Right, we're not that popular. We don't have some massive agent. We aren't hard to get a hold of. You get on our website. You can call me directly. We fly and meet together at some regional airport and have a cup of coffee. We're super transparent. We're at the point in our careers, Stacy and I specifically, we got lots of other great people that work for us that do lots of great things in safety and working with construction and mining and all industries. But we're at the point where it's just this is our passion. We want to help as many people get as good as they can possibly get with whatever it is that they're doing. So reach out. We're easy to get a hold of. I'm not that hard to find.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all the help that you give us. and the introductions and coming on the show and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. Really grateful for the relationship.
Us
Um,
too. Yeah, maybe more so the other way, Michael.
well, thank you. And thank you, of course, to our other sponsors. Thank you to Bonaccio Construction, MLB Construction, Martin Electric, People's, Michael's Group. Who am I forgetting right now?
Daigle.
Daigle, yeah, of course, Derek and his team at Daigle Cleaning, our team at Five Towers. And thank you to the listeners. And, great news. We are at number 7 of the top 35 podcasts in the blue collar profile. And, we're gunning for number 1. So please share the show, listen to the show, give us a nice 5-star review, subscribe if you're checking us out on Rumble or YouTube. And just really appreciate everybody's efforts to help the show go on and get this content in the hands of future blue collar business owners. And we'll just keep at it. So thanks again, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Thanks,
Yes,
Michael.
sir.
And that wraps up another episode of Blue Collar Startup. A big thank you to our sponsors, Five Towers Media, Daigle Cleaning Systems, Daigle Fire Solutions, The Michaels Group, Martin Electric, MLB Construction, Bonaccio Construction, People's, and Catamount Consulting for making this podcast possible. And thank you for tuning in. If you learned something or felt inspired, connect with us on our website at bluecollarstartup.io or email us at hardhat.bcsu@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions and topic ideas. Help us spread the word by sharing the show and following us on social media for updates. Until next time, keep on building, keep on dreaming, and keep hustling like your future depends on it.